Hello, welcome to the Pitcher Nail Down. As you know, I'm Big Italy 42, and he is Scott Mayo. We got Sports 25 to life. We're talking about tonight, an 8-game slate. We're talking about all the pitchers, who you want to play, who you want to target, who you're not really sure about, who you could take a chance on in GPPs, and then, who you feel good about in cash games. So we'll give you the odds, Vegas odds, all the things like that, try to help you out. And we'll start at the top where it's pretty cut and dry with Chris Sale. $10,900 on FanDuel, $10,400 on DraftKings, and he's a minus 145 favorite, facing off against a Houston team that, to put it lightly, is not very good against left-handed pitching. I'll say this, they're about average, 312 WOBA, but 24% strikeout rate, 171 ISO. You like the ISO, you like the walk rate. Unfortunately for them, Chris Sale doesn't walk very many batters, and he does strike out a lot. And he also doesn't give up very many home runs. So all of the strengths that they have kind of neutralized by quite possibly the hottest pitcher on the planet right now, because Chris Sale is really locked in.
Yeah, I mean, he's gone 7 innings in 5 straight games. Has double-digit strikeouts in 4 of those. I think he has, this looks like 52 strikeouts over the last 5 games. He's gone 8 innings in 3 of those. Like you said, he's not giving up home runs. I think he's only given up 6 total runs in those last 5 starts. Not many more hits than that even. He's just been fantastic. No more than 2 walks in any of those games. He looks like he's finally healthy. And really, this is probably the best matchup he's had.
Yeah, I mean, he's been absolutely dominant. So, I mean, we said on earlier podcasts today, he's your top option. It isn't close. And he's so good of an option, we think, or at least I think for sure, that you're going to have him in your cash games all over the place, and you're going to want to get yourself some GPP exposure, because it's quite possible that on a night like tonight, Chris Sale outscores everyone, and it's not particularly close.
Yeah, there's really no one else that has his upside. I mean, the second best pitcher on the slate today probably is A.J. Burnett, I would say, and I mean, he is nowhere near that strikeout upside anymore. He's been pitching pretty deep into games, but when you're you're basically guaranteed 7 innings from Sale unless he's like injured or something tonight.
Yep.
And there's a good chance you get 8 or 9 with the way the Astros swing the bat. I mean, he could mow through them with 14, 15 strikeouts and a really low pitch count. And you're just not going to get that from any of these other guys. I mean, I like AJ Burnett quite a bit. He's a really solid favorite, actually a bigger favorite than Chris Sale, but I mean, especially on DraftKings where the win doesn't count as much, it's a huge disparity. On FanDuel, I think it's a little bit closer just because the prices are a little bit more different. And, I mean, Burnett's almost a lock for a win tonight, in my opinion, with the way Pittsburgh's been hitting and with Milwaukee really struggling against right-handers, being in the bottom 5 in WOBA against righties, and just how good Burnett's been overall.
Yeah, and I mean, Burnett, highest strikeout rate, ground ball rate of anyone on the board tonight, 55.4. Doesn't give up home runs, 0.39 per 9 innings so far this season. Strikeout rate almost 23%. But like you mentioned, once again, going back to Sale just to compare the two, I mean, it seems like every time we look at pitchers and we talk about their best starts, all their best starts are against Houston. I don't know how many pitchers we've seen who had 10 strikeouts against Houston, very few of which are even close to the caliber of Chris Sale tonight. So I'm with you. I think that AJ Burnett's option B. I'm not going to give him the 1A tonight, but
no, not even close. Sure. Definitely second tier option. I mean, Sale's in a tier by himself today. It's really not even arguable. I can't imagine anyone saying anything different. So, I mean, his ownership's going to be huge. And like you said, even in GPPs, if he goes out and throws 8 innings and gives up 0 runs and strikes out 12 or 13 guys, he could outscore Burnett or whoever the second pitcher is by 20 fantasy points, and you're not winning anything without him.
Yeah, and I mean, in that situation, you got to make sure you have some of them, because many nights there's times where it makes sense to fade the chalk. I don't think tonight's one of those nights because he's just so head and shoulders above the rest. Looking at these other options, we'll go ahead with Cole Hamels now, $9,900 on FanDuel and $10,400 on DraftKings. Faces same Reds team at Citizens Bank Park in his last start. And he was fine. 7 innings, 8 Ks, 2 earned runs, 6 hits. Did have 3 walks. Kind of a little bit concerning because, he had gotten away from the walks, had big troubles with them earlier in the season, but also had big troubles with allowing home runs earlier this season as well. And you look at his numbers, 1.11 home runs per 9, not where you'd like it to be. Now he moves over to Great American Ballpark, where I think he's a great tournament option tonight. But price the way he is, I don't see any way that I play him in cash, even as an SP2 tonight.
No, it's tough. I mean, the price just makes it really hard when you're almost locking in Sale. It's just too hard to like match them up, especially with the rain concerns too. Is the other thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a decent amount of rain concerns in Chicago also, but I mean, it's looking pretty bleak in Cincinnati. Even Pittsburgh's not looking great right now, so it could be a really interesting slate here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm about 100 miles north of Cincinnati, and it's raining here right now. So, and this is early in the day, so it's not. It's one of those skies that you don't really expect you're going to see any sun today. So I'm not obviously I'm no meteorologist, but this Ohio weather, you see rain, you expect it's not going to stop. So
Yeah.
either way, yeah, some concerns there. Next guy, we can just go ahead and skip over him. John Lackey, you're not playing him in Colorado,
No.
so that's a next. Shelby Miller, $8,700 at home against San Diego Padres. $8,700 on FanDuel. That is 84 on DraftKings. And this is a guy that's been really effective. He's been a really good pitcher this year, but what he hasn't been doing is striking out a lot of batters. 18.1% strikeout rates, 50.8 ground ball rate, just 0.5 home runs per nine. He's been a very effective guy who's been pitching very deep into games, and you like that about him. You don't like the fact he doesn't have much strikeout upside, but then you look at the other side, and this is a San Diego Padres offense that been really bad. They're finally healthy. They got Yonder Alonso back. Matt Kemp finally had a big game the other day, but then followed up with one that wasn't so good. 26th in Team WOBA against right-handed pitching. I mean, you wouldn't be surprised to see him do one of those 7 2/3, 8-inning games. Maybe only 4 or 5 strikeouts, but just pitch deep.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's thrown 2 complete games already this year. I think he's had 8 strikeouts a couple times. So there's upside a little bit in both of those categories.
Yeah, absolutely with Shelby Miller. I mean, there's a little bit of risk, but not a lot. I mean, I think with him, you're certainly not chasing strikeouts. You're just trying to get him to eat up innings. And we mentioned on the DraftKings podcast, he probably has more value on DraftKings because he is good at limiting base runners, and obviously you get negatives for both those. FanDuel, you don't. So if he's only getting you about 3 strikeouts, it really doesn't matter if he's going 7 innings on FanDuel if he's only going to get you 10 points. So I think DraftKings is the place to play him. Phil Hughes is our next guy, $7,500 on FanDuel, $7,200 on DraftKings. I don't like targeting even elite pitchers against Kansas City. Phil Hughes obviously nowhere near elite in my mind. Not a chance I'm playing him tonight.
Yeah, I don't feel good about him at all either. I mean, Kansas City's just been really solid against righties. Hughes gives up too many home runs too for my liking, so I'm going to avoid him as much as I can. I really prefer like Bolsinger, who we can talk about here next, at $200 less than him on DraftKings, just a couple hundred less on FanDuel also. Despite Arizona having a pretty nice lineup, he's a huge favorite in this game at -165. Arizona's been much better against lefties than they have been against righties, although they're not bad against righties by any means either. But with the Dodgers offense behind him, and he's been thrown pretty deep into games, I feel pretty good about him as a cash game play, and at that price, a decent guy as far as upside goes for GPPs.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned his discount. He got $1,500 discount between him and Phil Hughes on FanDuel, so he's only $6,000. I mean, anytime you can get a guy, I mean, he had 20 fantasy points against Padres a couple starts ago. He's got that type of upside at $6K. I mean, you gotta give him a look tonight. And this is an Arizona team that you mentioned it earlier. They're much better against lefties. They're also much better at home. Still not a terrible team against righties though, but 20% strikeout rate, 316 Team WOBA.
Yep.
They're definitely beatable. I mean, if you can navigate Paul Goldschmidt, then you definitely have a pretty good chance of pitching deep, especially now Mark Trumbo's out of town, so that's another big bet you don't have to worry about there either.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point there.
All right, next up, we're going to go ahead and talk about Ian Kennedy, $7,300 on FanDuel, $7,700 on DraftKings. Gets an Atlanta team today that, they got off to a big start. They were the surprise team of the year. They don't strike out much, 16.9%, one of the lowest in the league. 314 Team WOBA, 128 Team ISO. Those numbers about average, but, Ian Kennedy, well, at least in years past, his upside was strikeouts. He's finally starting to get it going this year, 22.7, but big-time struggles with home runs as he has the last couple of years, 2.4 per 9 in his 45 innings pitched this year. Obviously, pitching in Atlanta, it's more of a pitcher's park than a hitter's park, of course, but he's the ultimate boomer bust play tonight, if you ask me. I mean, you could see him go 6-7 innings, get himself 7 or 8 Ks, or you could see him just get shelled over 2 or 3 innings. So I think he makes for a good GPP play because of that, but I'm just not seeing a ton of upside at that price tag with against a team that puts the ball in play a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you're really just going to need him to throw a ton of innings and have them not have very much batted ball up for him to have a really nice game, is what it comes down to. And that's certainly possible against an Atlanta team that, like you said, puts the ball in play a lot, but doesn't make really great contact all the time. They don't have a ton of power. So I don't mind him as a GPP play, and maybe you can get 7 innings of 1-run ball out of him where he only gives up 4 or 5 hits or something. And I mean, the big thing is he just doesn't, like, you almost need that to pay off his price tag. And because he's not going to rack up strikeouts. He's not a big strikeout pitcher. Atlanta's not a team that strikes out a lot. He's not a favorite in this game with the Padres not being a really good hitting team right now, and then facing Shelby Miller, who's been a pretty good pitcher. I just don't see the upside for 7,700 on DraftKings. I don't want to trust him as my one pitcher on FanDuel either, so he's not a guy I'm going to be using a ton, but I can see why people would use him today.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys, if you make 10, 20 lineups in a GPP, you throw him in 1, maybe 2. Well, 2 if you're playing 20, I should say. But definitely a guy that you don't feel great about. But for that same reason, you got to anticipate most people will probably be shying away from him for those same reasons. So should keep his ownership down pretty low as well. Next guy up, Mike Leake. $6,200 on FanDuel, $6,900 on DraftKings, and I think he's an interesting option tonight. He's a guy that I was trying to pick on against this team last time, and I mean I whiffed, or he just actually showed up. We've seen good and we've seen bad from him. He's not good against lefties. He's very good against righties. I think he's a nice SP2 option on DraftKings, and I'll have multiple tournament lineups, so I'll probably throw him on one on FanDuel as well at under 7K.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind him there. I think for the price, the upside, stuff like that, I think you're in good shape. I'm not overly worried about him having a huge blow-up game is the big thing. So I don't mind him as a cash game play. As a GPP play, he seems a little bit low upside for me, but like you said, we saw him have a really nice game against them last time.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we'll get to the guy that a lot of people will be talking about, Lance McCullers, $6,700 on FanDuel and $7,400 on DraftKings. This guy's really interesting the way he's been pitching recently. I mean, you look at his first couple games, 4 2/3, 6, 4 1/3 through 93, 189 pitches. Really had struggle with command and pitching deep. Then all of a sudden he throws up this complete game, 1 earned run, 4 hits against Baltimore with 11 Ks and 107 pitches. So you're obviously not expecting a repeat performance of that, but I tend to think that he's better than the guy that's going to go 4 1/3 and struggle with pitch count. So somewhere in between maybe, but I think due to his really high ownership, there is some merit to fading him in some of your GPPs tonight.
You don't have to worry about pairing him with Sale on DraftKings. I think he's probably a better play there.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that really concerns me. He's cheaper on FanDuel. You're not having to pair him with Sale. I think he's a fantastic GPP play there. And like you said, he's probably going to be pretty highly owned because of his outing last time. On DraftKings, it gets a little trickier because, I mean, when you're almost locking in Sale, it's really hard to lock in the guy you're throwing against him, too. So you're going to have to make a combination probably more like him and AJ Burnett, or maybe even go really cheap and load up on some of the Coors hitters or something like that and go McCullers and Bolsinger or something like that. So you're going to have to get a little bit more creative on DraftKings, where you probably don't want to throw those guys against each other in a GPP, because to actually win a GPP, you're probably going to need 2 wins from your pitchers. Yeah. So that's the part that makes it tough right there. Obviously has upside. We've seen it. Not a favorite, though, like we said, facing Sale, but the White Sox do strike out quite a bit. Their bats haven't been overly impressive this season. So, I mean, this could easily be a 1-0, 2-1 type game where both pitchers have really nice games. But, I mean, the fact that you can't get a win from both is what's going to hold me back on DraftKings. I'm going to have a lot of GPP lineups with him on FanDuel at 6,700 with just him as my pitcher, though.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you there. I mean, like you said, that White Sox lineup just not very good right now, and certainly some big-time upsides. So target whichever side of that. I mean, you could throw in that cheap duo you were talking about on DraftKings. You could do that. Maybe stack yourself some Blue Jays and then stack the rest with Coors. think that's not a bad way to go in tournaments. I'm sure that we won't be the only people thinking of that one. Ruby De La Rosa next up, $7,200 on FanDuel and $6,800 on DraftKings. He's a guy that I like to target in GPPs sometimes, but this is not one of those times. He's very bad against left-handed batters. Pretty good against righties, though. But as you're looking at his numbers against lefties, he's been pretty terrible. Allowing a .310 batting average. You got a lot of really good left-handed batters in this Dodger lineup. So for me, I mean, it's just not something I'm going to do. I guess I could see some merit to it because he does have some upside. He's got over 23% strikeout rate this year, but his home runs per nine 1.57. Just too many guys that can punish him tonight. So for me, I don't think he's worth the risk.
Yeah, the Dodgers are probably at worst the third best stack on the night against him because they have so many lefties in that lineup.
Yep. And
good ones, too. So, I mean, I just can't see playing him a ton. I mean, like you said, maybe a GPP play.
Yeah, that's about it. Maybe a single bullet. Next up, Marco Estrada. I'll tell you his prices, but I don't know why you would be playing him. He's $6,800 on FanDuel and $5,500 on DraftKings. I mean, he is facing a lineup that's really not very good in Miami, but they're moving over to the Rogers Center, and he's had a couple okay performances, and somehow not giving up a home run over his last two. But throughout his career, he's had big-time struggles with home runs. Just 1.19 this season, to put in perspective, a little bit better, or just slightly worse than Cole Hamels. But that fly ball rate at home in the Rogers Center, I just don't have any faith in him. I could see you throwing him in as an SP2, but I won't be doing it tonight.
Yeah, I honestly kind of like him as a cash game play, honestly. At 5,500, he's the biggest favorite on the board at -175. Yeah. I think Toronto's just absolutely going to crush Hand tonight. So even if he gives up 4 or 5 runs in 5 or 6 innings, something like that, I mean, he could get you the win and have a decent performance for 5,500 on DraftKings. It's a little bit pricier and probably not worth the risk on FanDuel where you only have one pitcher. But, I mean, you can go Sale Estrada and get some pretty solid batters in your lineup. So that's going to be something I do a decent amount probably in both cash games and GPPs. But he's not a guy I'm going out of my way to get. Like you said, too much home run potential. I mean, could easily be a two home run game for Giancarlo Stanton here. And that's the scary part, is he's got to go through him 4 times. And that's not something that's going to be pretty, probably at least 3 of those times.
Yeah, that's not something that anyone wants to do, especially a guy who struggles with home runs. So, and yeah, just to further your point there, Marlins 28th in the league against right-handed pitching, 292 WOBA, lowest team ISO 101, strikeout just over 20% of the time. So, yeah, I could see him as a cheap option at 55 on DraftKings. He's one of those guys I never really play, but I mean, I guess as you look at it, I mean, he hasn't been bad over his last few starts, so I think he's an interesting option now. Jimmy Nelson, James Nelson, whatever you want to call him, $6,500 on FanDuel. He was the sexy pick for a while in GBPs. A lot of people played him. I saw him in some cash games, $6,700 as well on DraftKings. Gets Pittsburgh tonight, and this is the Pittsburgh team that really starting to get it going. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. They're a team that's finally starting to hit the ball. Still right around league average. But this is a guy that I'm not going to play. I mean, I'll put it simply. Some people like him. Some people have an affinity for Jimmy Nelson. I'm not one of those people. I won't be playing him tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I'll toss him in there a bit in GPPs. I don't hate it. At 6,700 on DraftKings against a Pittsburgh team that up until like 8 days ago wasn't doing anything against righties, I think he has some decent upside here. We've seen a couple 25-point games from him where he goes 7-8 innings and strikes out a decent number of batters. I think we saw an 11 strikeout game from him at one point, but he gives up too many runs is the big thing. I mean, even in that game, I think it was against the Cubs when he struck out 11 guys, he gave up 4 runs in 7 innings. We've seen a couple other nice games where he struck out 8 guys in 6 innings against Arizona and still gave up 4 runs. He got worked by St. Louis last time out. So, I mean, he's a GPP play at best, but I just prefer other guys to him around that price range today.
Yeah, I mean, you're living on the edge with him. He gives up a ton of base runners. He's just a guy that you're going to be on the edge of your seat all night if you roster him with those lineups. So, with that, that'll wrap things up for us. Not touching these last 2 guys, Brad Hand, David Hale. 2 guys that are supposed to get hit as hard as anyone on tonight's slate. So find us on Twitter at DF Cafe, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out all of our content at dailyfantasycafe.com.